We keep our eye on those numbers at the bottom of the screen to see whether or not it will be a majority or a minority. We want to get some analysis to this significant moment in the night from our top strategists, Corey tonight, Kathleen Monk, and Scott Reid. Corey, I'll start with you. We talked earlier, Omar mentioned that you made a ton of news, so did the Premier Doug Ford, for criticizing the Conservative campaign for not focusing on Donald Trump enough. Is this outcome emblematic of that, in your view?
I think that's part of it, but I think in many respects, you know, as you reflect on this race, it was largely put in jeopardy before the campaign even began. I think the biggest strategic error that the Conservatives had going into this election was pounding Justin Trudeau and the Liberals with tens of millions of dollars of pre-read advertising to the point where they drove them down to 18–19% in the polls and made it an existential question around the leadership of the Liberal Party. And you know, it's not just Trump; it's the loss of Trudeau. If you think of this election race as if Pierre Poilievre was fighting against Justin Trudeau, and you kept everything else the same, right, we'd be having a Conservative majority tonight, I believe. So I think it was a big strategic error. We just went too hard in the lead up to the campaign, and we got rid of the guy who was going to deliver a victory for us, and that guy was Justin Trudeau. That said, you know, there was still, I think, an opportunity to change more of the focus towards Trump. Going into the campaign, there was a space when the Liberal leadership was going on. There was a real vacuum there. That's the vacuum that Ford stepped into, but he didn't have to do that alone. I think there was an opportunity for the federal Conservatives to do the same. But all of that to say, you know, this is a heartbreaking night for Conservatives across the country. And I think there's going to be a lot of focus on what happens next, both inside the party, but also to see what Carney and the Liberals will do. Are they going to reach out to the West? Some of the things that Ronna brought up earlier, I think, are really poignant. You know, there's going to be a need to build some bridges to parts of the country that really felt left out by this Liberal government over the last 10 years. It's a super salient point, Kathleen. I think at the same time as we look at what might have went wrong for the Conservatives, it's fair to look at what went right for the Liberals and give them their due, and give Mark Carney his due, who a few months ago was a complete political neophyte. Obviously, rumors for years that he never dispelled that he was going to run, but this is quite the turnaround story, led very specifically by him.
For sure, from funeral march to victory, right? Literally a politician for, what, 3 months, and Prime Minister for 9 days, and now it looks like he will form government, to be determined whether it's minority or majority, but definitely a win. I'll build on what Corey said earlier. The Conservatives not only preconditioned Canadians to dislike Justin Trudeau through their millions of dollars of ads, they also did the same thing to Jagmeet Singh, running millions of dollars of ads against Mr. Singh as well. And he's paying the price. He's feeling that tonight. In fact, the polling, the national polling, looks like New Democrats aren't even hitting what pollsters predicted of around 8–10%, really more like 4 or 5%. So the question is, for New Democrats, was their strategy of moving early to protect incumbents, to focus on those local campaigns? Will they be able to pull out some of those incumbents? I don't think it's going to be all, 24, but will they reach party status, or will they, they certainly have lost beachheads in the past, the beachheads we talked about earlier in Atlantic Canada, but if they start to lose beachheads in Quebec or Ontario or in the prairies, that is not a good sign for the party.
Scott, the story of the NDP, that percentage that Kathleen just referenced, is a huge part of the Liberal story tonight as well.
Absolutely gigantic. And I think as the evening goes on and these seat totals mount, I think we'll see that it's even more significant. They're really underperforming what were incredibly low expectations already, particularly when you take a look at the province of Ontario. We'll see as more numbers come in from BC, that could be very consequential in trying for the Liberals whether or not they meet this majority line. I just want to add one thing. I really want to underline this point about what an astonishing, historical, unbelievable, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it if this was a movie kind of event this is for the Liberal Party of Canada. Like, they were dead and buried, covered in topsoil and leaves, left by the side of the road.
We covered their funeral
4 months ago.
For months.
Yeah.
For 2 years, in fact.
A couple weeks after Justin Trudeau stepped down, announced that he would step down in January, a friend called me and said, I can't believe this story about Mark Carney. He's not really going to run, is he? Why would he leave the life that he has in order to take on this certain death march? Why on earth would he do it? And I said, well, because he thinks he could win. And There was laughter on the other side of the phone. And, you know, here we are, 3 months later, and he has pulled this off. It is astonishing. For someone who never ran for elected office, never held elected office, walked in and has pulled off something that's astonishing and unseen before in electoral history in Canada.
Very quickly.
I think there's one other thing that's really important to reflect on in this, and that is this collapse of the NDP and what drove that, because I think Trump is part of that story. I think it was probably a much bigger part of the story with the Bloc Québécois. But I think there's a question as to whether or not the type of campaign that the Conservatives ran was so frightening to NDP voters that they gave up their, decades-long voting preference to vote Liberal for a Bay Street banker, which is not really a likely place that you would think that would go.
Yeah.
So I think to give the Conservative Party credit, like they have built their base to, I think, a historic level. But in doing so, they may have moved the goalpost further away if the result of that is the collapse of the NDP to that degree.
Great point.
It is a great point. And Corey, just very quickly, I mean, what is the soul-searching moment now for the Conservatives? What is Pierre Poilievre thinking tonight, and what happens to his future, and what is the party thinking tonight?
Well, I think there's got to be a lot of questions asked around that, but I don't think there's one Conservative Party. This is why you see so few Conservative governments at the federal level. There's really like 5 different Conservative parties across the country, and what constitutes conservatism on the prairies, which is where I'm from, it looks a lot different in Ontario, where I am now, or in BC, or in Quebec, or in the Maritimes. And you have to try to find a through line through these disparate types of Conservatives that often have some pretty big internal contradictions within them. So it's a real challenge, and I think tonight's result speaks to that challenge, and to try to find a through line through those different things is going to be the challenge for the party.